Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to Dreamy Dreamland with your sensei, Al Bob, your griot, here to tell you a story. So, everything that's going on, how you doing? Hmm? So, how do you feel? Hmm? What do you want to do with your life? Hmm? Are you happy just being in that office with a fluorescent light over you? As you look out the window, that plant you have by the window is turning brown. You spend most of your time on Zoom meetings, even from your office. Why couldn't I do this at home? You have a little nook, a corner of the room, and they call that your office. And you know more about what's going on in your company than the president, right? But you still only get, a handful of dollars. Very similar. Did you ever see the movie Brazil? That movie came out. I was living in Soho, and Soho had was basically Soho was the first really heavy industry in the United States, other than the stuff that things up in New England where there was running water, where they could have paddle wheels, and that was their energy to run a factory. That's why Massachusetts and New Hampshire had manufacturing, right? And so but in New York, the first kind of industry was, or at least an industry for New York, because New York actually, up until 9/11, New York was pretty much a manufacturing town, and it stopped being it in the 90s. But it was, because Bill Clinton sent manufacturing out of this country, with NAFTA, and yes. George H. started NAFTA, but and Reaganism started, defunding the government and decontrolling it. But Bill Clinton did more of that than anyone, and also it set us up for never-ending wars. And the first one we hit out of the ballpark was our war in you know the Sarajevo, Yugoslavia, right? Because yes, Milosevic shot a lot of people. Took them out of the house and blew their brains out. But um, Billy Boy basically got NATO to monetize it and just blow the crap out of everything. And it was the golf cart was started rolling down the hill with George H. going into Iraq, right? The Desert Storm, and I wish I could get my phone to play this thing. Democracy Now! Does a pretty good job of going on about stuff. It has its own, see, the thing about media and, global telling the story of what's going on, how, Goebbels said, the best way to tell propaganda is with 60% truth, right? 40% your propaganda, 60% of truth. And that's what you get, right? That's what every news entity kind of gives you, right? So good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to Dreamy Dreamland with your sensei Al Bob, Nanook of the North here, where it's starting to get cold. And where it's this is a rainforest, so it's moist all the time. Summertime it's nice because you're like living in a you know a swamp cooler. But in winter, fall and winter, it gets a little nippy. And I'm an old guy, so I can't take cold as much. I never liked cold, but being in your 70s. So I'm getting myself ready for winter, and that's what I've been doing. So that hurricane's supposed to kind of bounce around here next few days. So tonight, tomorrow, Sunday, Monday, maybe probably cruise out of here Tuesday should really, really, really be a lot of rain. Now I'm on top of a mountain. I've got a lot of drains. It'll be a good test of my efforts of the last 20 years here at the Deep Green. Now the people around me, the rich folk who have cut up tops of mountains without any kind of thought of drainage. I'm on top of the mountain. Well, yeah, good luck with that. We'll see what happens. And we last year when they really went nuts and started, they took off on the other side of the lake. They took off this whole ridge, flattened it out, took all the trees out. And when they did it in the summertime, it really didn't rain. And then right about now, we had one of these things where a hurricane kind of bounced around up here. And just 2 days of pretty hard rain of like maybe 4 inches, right? It wiped one whole side of the mountain down into the valley and took out the county road. So 2/3 of the three corners, meaning the three different counties and two states that I live in, um, it was cut off. You had to either go all the way to Boone and then take 421 into Mountain City and then take 67 back to Elizabeth. You had to go 100 miles to do 30 miles, right? Because of these morons, right? And no one, did the county, did the state, did the federal government slap their wrist for doing that? No, because our county has no building codes whatsoever, right? So, and it behooved them to do what they did because it wiped out the mountain in such a way that when the county and state and federal government had to fix it, they had to build the road back up to where their property was. So they got a much better entrance into their little soon to be gated community. And they had bought up all, because we had like a little depression here, they had bought up all of the places where you make stone and all of the heavy construction and excavation companies and the blacktop company they bought up. And that's kind of like what you would see in a money laundering thing. So you buy up all this stuff, buy it. It's like what Warren Buffett would say: buy, borrow, die. Right, and that's what these guys are doing to this neighborhood. Right, they bought it all up. They're ripping it apart. A lot like Robert Moses did to the United States when he built the military industrial, and that's what it was called. It was called the Military Highway Interstate System, right? And they also called it the Eisenhower Military Highway System, right? So, and that's when, the kiss of death. See, Jim Crow actually, everything has unexpected consequence. Because of, Jim Crow, the black folk were forced to live in black communities. So that meant black folk had to go to black stores, had to go to black hospitals, had to go to black movie theaters, had to go to black. So by the 50s, the black folk in America had the seventh largest GDP in the world. And that's why LBJ could get all those blue dog Democrats. It was really interesting. Most Republicans wouldn't like to hear this, but up until 1980, up until Ronald Reagan, the Republicans were liberals. Like what's his name? Like Dick Nixon was a liberal, right? He started Medicaid, Medicare, EPA, all of those things that we think are like liberal bastions came from Dick Nixon. Basically caused the breaking of the Cold War by going into China, right? And so, but he was just a poster boy. He was just doing what Dr. Kissinger was telling him, and Dr. Kissinger was just doing what Mr. Rothschild was telling him, and Mr. Rothschild was doing whatever space alien, time creature, dimensional, insectoid was telling him. And don't believe a word I say. Come on, guys. This is a story. Now, sit down, kids. Your griot owl, Bob, will tell you a story, right? I didn't bring my reading glasses. I just brought my seeing glasses. I can't even see who that is. But it's a happy face. So thanks up. How about there's two of you? How about two thumbs up, right? So right now I have all of $1.19 in my checking account to last me for the next 3 weeks. It'd be nice if somebody could throw something in my old PayPal, right? The dude awake 42 at Gmail. Dude awake 42 at Gmail. Dude awake 42 at Gmail. How about some thumbs up? Come on. How about some comments? You left some comments right here, but I can't read them. Don't be a lot of smiles. Okay, I'll just go with the emojis. That's all I can see. So right now, what we've got, I was talking to one of my friends who has a very important job, and he was, so what do you think's going on? And I gave him my little 411. And now, don't believe a word I say. This isn't a fake news. This isn't, you know, whatever, what's his name? What are those guys? The insectoids that run YouTube. I actually started a website when I was in Asheville with this guy I knew who was really great with the internet stuff, right? And he did one thing. One time we were drunk, and he was showing what addresses were, right? And so I said, so .com, does Coca-Cola have one of these sites? And so he checks it. No, says, what's it cost to get one? He says, oh, nothing. First, at that time it cost nothing. So we got General Motors, General Electric, Coca-Cola, Pepsi Cola, you name it. We had a list of all the top 500 corporations, and we just got, and none of them had a .com, right? So we took it all, right? About 10 years later, after I'd left there, he was really sick, and he was selling them for a few grand here, a few grand there for each address. And then the guys who I forgot, they became the guys who do it, bought him out for like 300 grand. And his wife was really sick, so he needed the money, so he did it. And that's why, see, when you have nothing, when you have $1.19 in your checking account, it's like it doesn't matter. It'd be nice if you sent me something. I might be able to buy some food. My blood sugar has been up a little bit because I've just been eating these days the stuff the church gave me. And everything the church gives me is stuff like a hamburger helper. Well, it'd be fine if I had hamburger to throw in there, but I just, you go into the woods and get some bark and some mushrooms. Mushrooms are kind of, I get them sparingly, but they're kind of almost gone. And there's, I used to live on dandelions, but they're kind of gone. But their leaves, I still eat their leaves as salad. And so I can't go anywhere. The best I can go is a mile from my front door to my neighbor and go up on his driveway to leave you this thing. But he's going to have guests in the next week or two, so I probably won't be communicating to you at all, right? So how to be at ease? What is ease, right? It's the lack of ease that you don't want, because what is the lack of ease? You go into the Greek and it is dis, right? So dis-ease, right? And that's what's going on with the human race. We're all suffering from dis-ease, right? And the ultra motif of this is war. And so, we have the war in Ukraine, which, this is how I see it going down, right? And pretty much, guys, I've got almost 2,000 shows in my channel. Why don't you go and watch a few of them? When I can't really, I want to see Al Bob, go look at, go back 2 years, right? Go back to 2020 when we were just diving into the pool, or 19. I started doing the big splat shows in 2019, right? When I heard from my friend, what's his name? Hmm, I forget his name, but he was the first guy who really started to talk about 19. And he was, oh, what was that guy's name? You? Maybe you. No, it'll pop into my mind. Bald head, wore a cap. He was out in his garage all the time. And he was a computer programmer that did modeling for DARPA, modeling like what would nuclear war be, what would be, this be, what would that be? He did model, for 20, 30 years, he did that, right? And so, what's his name? And so he basically was the first guy who kind of heard about what was coming out of Wuhan. And he was also saying, I think this is going to happen because in Wuhan right now, they're having the military Olympics. And virtually every country in the world sent 40 or 50 military guys from, their military, their Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines to, run and jump and javelin and throw heavy stones and ride bicycles and ice skating, doing the Olympics, but for the military, right? They all in Wuhan the month before it started to come out. They were there in October, November, left in December, right? And everyone had the flu, right? And he said, I think something's going on, right? And then he found out about this doctor who said, hey, he was a virologist on his own. He worked for like the city and he worked at a hospital. He saw all these people coming in and he said, I think, we better start, you know, battening down the hatches. He said that to the Wuhan city government of like millions of people who live there. And they like said, oh, shut up. Right? And then he kept putting things on the internet and talking about it, and the government came to him and took him away. And then he seemed to die in jail. Right? And a couple other doctors said the same thing. And so this guy, he started to notice it, on the deeper, he could be Chinese. Like seeing what people were saying on, the the Chinese internet until the Chinese kind of locked it all down, and and so it kind of blew out, and then those people got sick on on the big boats, right? And then the big hurricane happened, and Donnie went down to Puerto Rico and just threw them, paper towels, and then took away their whatever little individuality they had in their political structure. And I mean, they had municipal things taking care of water and power and light and all of that. And then Donnie, basically through the power of the purse, got them to sell all that stuff to private entities. That, especially the electric guy, good buddies, um, of the swamp, got it for nothing, and then charged us, the federal taxpayer, $10 billion to band aid the utility back together. And now you see what they got, right? So, meaning what Puerto Rico needs is a very um, decentralized power grid, meaning they need, wind generators and solar um, facilities in each of those little towns. All those houses should have a sturdy roof with a photo cell on it. If everyone had that and they were all tied into a grid, even their band-aided grid, they could, they wouldn't need a single generator to make the electricity. Everybody be making it and dumping it in the grid, and that way that stuff is really cheap. Now we could just take Puerto Rico and use it as an example. Look, there's the hardest place to do this here. We're going to go do it. For the $10 billion that we gave this private corporation to fix Puerto Rico's power structure, they could have built 10 of these um, systems for the whole, 10, they could have done it to 10 different Puerto Ricos, right? But they didn't. They just put it in the pocket. And that's what I call um, egocentricism, meaning instead of capitalism, right? Egotism, ego, capitalism, ego. Because if we had Adam Smith capitalism, yeah, that'd be pretty cool, but we don't. Everybody's trying to make the big kill with each, next oh quarter, right? I mean, I used to work for the corporate structure negotiating deals, and I kept saying, "Why don't we do it so you can make money for here to eternity? You keep doing it, so you're just making more money per quarter. You have the same problem next quarter, and then if you keep having the same problem quarter after quarter, you may make a profit more than the last quarter, but within 5 years, you won't have a company, right? And that's kind of what we got now because I died in 2014. Um, you know, 6 years after '08, and we haven't gotten over it. And that's what's going on in the world. The ripple of '08. And '08 was a ripple of 91, and 99, right? Which were ripples from '86, the savings and loan collapse. We went from having 36,000 banks. I don't mean like the Harvey Larry savings and loan, but big county banks that had like 100 branches all over their neighborhood, right? And all those have died, and now we only have 7 banks, right? Just like when the big rush onto the internet occurred in the '90s, there were hundreds and hundreds of small startups. Now we have 9 mega entities that and their algorithms are creating the world that we're going to live in, right? And those algorithms, they aren't just smart, they reflect, who writes those algorithms but white men. Facial recognition can only recognize white men. Can't it can't even tell the gender of a black face. And there are all kinds of laws saying that you can't advertise, you can't put a when a thing, help wanted only white men between 22 and 35 apply. They can't have that. But you can put that ad on some um, you know platform, and within the algorithm, it's only going to look for the white men between 23 and 35. But it won't say it is, right? It's not advertising it is. And that's what I'm talking about. I mean, most of medicine is based on the average male, meaning they don't, men, when they have a heart attack, have a thing in their heart and they feel the pain up their arm. No, when women have a heart attack, they feel constipated. They don't get the pain up the arm. So women come, I just don't feel right. Something's wrong. Oh, it's all in your head. Go home. And they die of a heart attack, right? That's why women were having some of the highest rates of heart attacks, right? All of the drugs are designed based on men. Blood pressure was designed on men and only 7 men, right? So up until the 1990s, they didn't even add in women. Car safety is all based on men. Those dummies they put in there are men, not women, right? When the girls went up there to fix the Hubble telescope, the 2 girls they trained ferociously to fix it. I mean, they were at it, and they got up there, and they didn't have spacesuits for women. Women are different; their bodies are shaped different. You don't want to have a spacesuit that you're like a bunch of lumpy potatoes. And no, your spacesuit should, if you look at the first space guys, the Mercury 7, their spacesuits were like straight to their skin, right? Because it works better. You don't want, when you feel that thing, you pressurize your body. You don't want that spacesuit to be 2 feet away from your body. You want it to be, 2 inches from your body. Anyway, now these are all interesting subjects I'm talking about. And I don't even tell you to believe anything I say, but you know, I've been put on the back burners of YouTube's algorithm. Like, that's why there's only one person watching, right? And Anyway, so uh, how to be at ease, right? To realize bliss, you have to realize that your life is not about you. It's about all your relations. And that doesn't mean your brothers and sisters, but it includes them. It doesn't even include just the human race. Includes everyone, every furred, scaled, skinned, what else? Feathered, and biological thing, alive and dead. Um, the trees, the flora and fauna, 7 generations from the past should inform us what we are doing today, and 7 generations into the future, we should be doing what we're doing today to take care of their life. So, I've written a number of, if you go to xratted.blogspot.com, you may find the beginnings of my novels. If you want to read my novels, go to the Dude Awake 42 at Gmail, Dude Awake 42 at Gmail, and jump in there. And I have this one story about Ray. He was a gangster wannabe. And I basically talk about New York City. And I wrote that in 2000. No, I actually wrote that in 1986 when the savings and loan collapse happened, and I was living again, not for the first time, but for like the 9th time in Williamsburg. And I was living in a, it was just before the gangs were bought out by the corporations, right? And so that's what I saw. So I was saying, look at this. And that's where I had a good friend who started in the 80s, Brooklyn Academy of Music. I lived in Williamsburg in the from about 74 until 82. And then I came back around 86 because a friend of mine had a bunch of buildings. He was getting old and he had a bunch of things he wanted to fix up. He said, "Oh, you can live in one of these lofts until I sold the building." So I did. Right? And I fixed up his stuff for him. And then I went out to Long Island and got involved in that. But I still kept those and kept coming back to New York to do art. Anyway, my whole life, I've had great obstacles. Everything has been a great obstacle, but I've been blessed with being naively innocent. Right. So I was born dead, and this amazing doctor, Dr. Black, one of the first female doctors, she kind of revolutionized the revolution of women's medicine. And I was, a breech baby, and these morons were trying to pull me out with salad tongs, and she pushed them out of the way, got them out of the delivery room, and calmed everything down. Gave my mom a lot of oxygen and nitrous oxide, not a lot of nitrous oxide, but enough nitrous oxide to calm her down. And and then that got to me, and I kind of calmed down. And it did a nice chemical thing, so I wasn't a blue baby. And she kept me inside the easy bake oven for a couple hours, and then she moved me around and then delivered me. Right, so I didn't die in birth like the two before me. Right, so my mom really, she was in her 50s when she had me, and so she, her version of birth control was cigarettes and alcohol, and so I was marinated in that in those 9 months, and that's kind of why I am the way I am, I'm sure. And then when I came out, I was just stuck on the basically the porch because my parents lived in this little teeny house. They had 4 other kids. They didn't want me in their bedroom, so they stuck me on the porch in the winter. And my uncle Steve was my godfather. He was the head of maintenance at Kennedy before it was Kennedy when they called it no Idlewild, and so he brought his plumbers over, put a new boiler in the house, and put a gigantic, you know, radiator across this. It was basically a sunroom, so all these glass windows. And so, man, that radiator turned that place into the Caribbean, and steam would come up and cover in the wintertime. It would cover the all the glass with steam, and the steam would turn into ice, and the sun would come, and to be rainbows everywhere. So I remember that. I remember that. And he made me. My parents put me in a dresser drawer that was painted with lead paint, and he saw that, and he knew that wasn't right. So he had his carpenter boys make a cedar, um, crib, and he put me in that, and it was great. I still love the smell of cedar. So I remember the smell of cedar. Um, and my mom didn't breastfeed me; she fed me formula, and the cardboard box was had more vitamins than that crap. But my grandma, her best friend, who lived next door to her, had a older daughter who was a nurse, and that lady had 4 kids, and she had just had a baby. So she would come over and breastfeed me, and that lady was black. That was Mamo, right? And she was brilliant. She had a college degree, and during World War II, she worked in military hospitals and was a lieutenant. But after the war, she went back to cleaning houses, right? Even though she had a master's degree in hospital administration. So, so that was my life. I would have these kind of real interesting challenge, and then always have this, thing or person that would, save my bacon, right? So can't even see what this says. Um, cancel. Can't even read this. Why'd they make this stuff bigger? Are you sure? Cancel. I mean, I could have hit a button and I didn't even know it. I can't see anything. From my nose out 5 feet, it's a blur. Even wearing these glasses, I can't read what you're writing. I say put it in capitals, and I think you have, but I still can't see it. Right? I need my. I have my obelisk. No, I don't. But anyway, I'll go back to telling stories. So, war is the super lack of ease. So we've been at war basically since Christopher Columbus came here, right? The expansion across the West, the whole thing about the water in the West is there to it. All those laws were put in place to motivate people to go west, right? And why California grows all of our vegetables to motivate that economy in the West, right? And back when we had big snowpacks and it all worked out, but it was pretty much understood back in what's his name? Who's the guy? Newton. Newton understood. He wrote a treatise on um, the long count because he said that God was like a watchmaker, and he basically said that Earth just goes through a changing motif. Takes long, said millions of years, sometimes thousands of years, sometimes just a few years, and the powers that be didn't like him talking about that, so he didn't. He gave them the science they wanted, right? That he became a wealthy guy. He's known for the apple and all the above, right? And he picked that apple as a metaphor for Adam and Eve eating the apple, right? So I mean, a pear could have fallen on his head, peach could have fallen on his head, but all of these things are right in front of us, right? So back in 19, when I wish I could. He's just got a bald head, and he's interesting. And he's always in a place that's cold. He's always having. He's kind of like me. That's the word. And he was the first guy who really said the 911 and 411 of what's going on with COVID. And anyway, so I knew him from a long time ago when I went to MIT, and all the guys who did modeling for nuclear war and that kind of stuff. They were at this symposium, and they were taking that, infant technology, and we were taking the data that we had collected, not just in the last 200 years, but as far back as Babylon, right? And my job with these linguist guys was to kind of break it down and put it into the nomenclature of geologists and weather guys of today, right? So we saw how this, like the big flood was basically a weather change, right? And you could see by the remnants of the things in Earth, different metals and different isotopes, that we've had, polar shifts, right? The North Pole became the South Top. Whee, a spin like a top. And all of this information is not fake news. It's kind of right there, but it's kind of buried. And who even looks at that stuff? Not too many, right? And you know, what's his name spoke 1984. The biggest issue in that is fake news, right? That you can rewrite history if you control what people are thinking it is at the moment, right? So Vlad's little thing of going into the Ukraine and saying, "Okay, this part's us now. Now, if you come after us, we're going to attack you." So we, not we, but the Ukrainian military, with the auspice of our weapons and very judicious weapons, we didn't give them a lot of stuff. We gave them things, specific things, javelins in the beginning to like stop them in their tracks. Then the HIMARS to go after there, because the way Russians fight a war is they have all this big artillery. They line it up. They said they don't even aim it. They blow away 2 miles. They move 2 miles, blow away another 2 miles, and that whole thing from the Donbass down to the south, they just obliterated everything. And so now they own it, right? It's obliterated everything. Well, if I was Mr. Stand-up comedian, I would say, fine, okay, let's say you owned that. Okay, you put let's first of all let's talk about it. So let's stop fighting. Period. Now that would be great for Vlad because he could reconstitute his military, but at the same time, so could the Ukrainians, right? So they seem to do better, right? So we only gave the Ukrainians 16 of those HIMARS, and they ate Russians' lunch, right? Now you have to realize the Russians, not only were they suckered to go south, that's what they wanted. They wanted a land entity, that whole northern eastern part of Ukraine, to be theirs all the way down to the Black Sea. And then they would have gone to Odessa if they could, but they couldn't. And so if we were to give, let's say, the Ukrainians 100 HIMARS, right, and a few other weapons, that would be it for Russia. They could not sustain that. The guys would just take it all away, right? Well, now Vlad goes, "Oh, I'm going to use an atomic bomb." Well, he's not going to use an atomic bomb in Europe, at least not at this moment. What he is going to do, and again, this is night walker. Don't believe a word I say. But so they have to. So right now in Poland, there's, I don't know, 5 or 6 bases where we fly C-130s and other transportation aircraft in. And a C-130 can take one HIMAR and fly it from anywhere in the world right to one of those Air Force bases. It rolls off, and the Ukrainians drive it into Ukraine. Right. So at the beginning of the war, the Russians blew up because the Ukrainians were basically driving. You know, the Americans and Europeans, NATO, were flying and transporting materials into these airports, military airports that had big distribution facilities, and they were taking them right to the border of Ukraine, and the Ukrainians would be waiting there and drive them, and they would be trained in those bases on how to use those weapons, right? So we've trained them on a lot of other weapons, right, which we haven't quite given them yet. Like they're about anywhere between 30 and 100 A-10s, ground attack um, aircraft. Excellent ground attack aircraft. And there's probably somewhere between 40 and 100 F-15Es, 1990s version, but E's, meaning electronic warfare, and have while it's a wild weasel aircraft, meaning it's there to destroy air to ground to air missile batteries, right? And that's the E's. The F's are do the same thing, but in the air to aircraft, right? And so they have the ability to take out aircraft, you know, 50 miles away. They have really good radar in the nose and the missiles they got, and they got a ton of missiles. Each one of those stacks up. In each pod, they have 4 to 6 pods on each aircraft, and on each pod, they can have 4 to 6 of these missiles. So each aircraft could fly with something to the order of 30 missiles that can take down expensive, Su-29s and high-end aircraft. And Ukraine's been doing a pretty good job at that with just Stingers and a few other aircraft. So anyway, so let's say Russia, does this thing, and Ukraine gets a few more HIMARS and starts, nibbling away at what Russia calls Russia in Ukraine. So what they would do is they take whatever they have left of their cruise missiles that are relatively um, accurate, and they are pretty accurate. They just wiped out a whole um, bunch of vehicles going into that part of Ukraine that is now Russia, bringing food, and the Ukrainians advertised it as food for people who are starving in Ukraine that is now Russia. And Russia hit it with a cruise missile and wiped the whole thing out. Now, Ukraine did that on purpose, so Russia would take it out and they could advertise, look how bad these guys are, right? And that's how Ukraine, postures Russia as, heartless, cruel, evil. But in war, everyone's evil, right? So Russia will basically go, okay, we have to take this, where they're bringing all these HIMARS and other even more advanced weapons that they're going to eat our lunch with. We have to take that out. So they will use one of those pretty highly accurate cruise missiles and take out those airports, those military bases in Poland. Bingo, NATO's off to the game, right? So, you know, not just those whatever survived in those bases, but we probably have 300 A-10s and maybe 300 F-15s, Gs through Js, which are very, very, very capable aircraft. And we will have NATO pilots and Ukrainian pilots because we've been training them for the last 10 years to do this, right? And they will do a air supported ground artillery mode of blitzkrieg into that area and take it all and keep going into Russia, right? And start taking out the logistic points in Russia. Now, Russia won't nuke Europe, but what it will do is send an ICBM launched from out there because they got all these mobile ICBMs that emerged that are like 40 years old, right? Basically expendable. Solid fuel ICBMs can go 11,000 miles, right? So, and they got them all over the place. They got them all out there in the Asian part of Russia, up in the steppes, way out there, right? So we keep an eye on them, right? We know when they launch something. So we have Russia totally covered with satellites, listening to them, watching them. We have ones that can tell when a ICBM is launched from the sea or the ground. So anyway, Russia will launch just one of these ICBMs, and we'll launch it at something like right now, this minute, this second, um, The Ronald Reagan aircraft carrier, one of the last of the Nimitz class, but still costs like $20 billion. Um, it support it's got like six Aegis destroyers, missile destroyers, and they're doing little stuff with the South Korean military to just tell the North Korean, yeah, you can shoot your little missiles off. Don't get too carried away. Anyway, so that's there. Right? So it has to, how did it get there? They didn't fly it there. It kind of went on the sea, went through the Pacific, went, you know, through the Hormuz. They went through a lot of places where that aircraft carrier is like in a corner. So the Russians have their own little satellites that, especially in the Persian area of the neck of the woods. They have lots of stuff, and also NATO neck of the woods. They have lots of stuff, but not out in the Atlantic too much. Anyway, so they or the Baltic. You'd think they would, but they don't. So anyway, they got a lot of stuff. So they could keep an eye. It's hard to hide a an aircraft carrier that's like 2 miles long that has 5,000 guys on it that has 12 ships around it, right? And so it goes as a crew, whole bunch. They don't go separate here, there, and everywhere. They're all together. So Russia can launch an ICBM, a MIRV, right, and know exactly where it is, and zero it in and come down on the aircraft carrier, right? Now that sucker has the ones that are built in the '80s, the Russian SS, whatever they are, um, that are out there in the steppes, um, solid fueled. They can hit that. They can hit a spot pretty close, and having a hydrogen bomb or a large atomic bomb is, not you can miss something by a few feet with a nuclear weapon. So they shoot at that aircraft carrier. Now our satellites right away pick it up. Soon as it starts to bank, you know where it's going. What target's that? Oh, look. Oh, no. The Reagan is there. Ooh, we got to get the Reagan out of there. Now, the Reagan has a top speed of like a speedboat, right? Now, the Russian satellites, they don't have a lot of them, right? So they can tell where the Reagan was when they pinpoint where it was. And they can say it's going in that direction. So they can kind of say, keeps going in that direction, doing the same speed it's doing. It'll be here when that missile gets here. So that's kind of where they point the missile. So the missile's coming in on that way. We see where it's going. We turn the Reagan and head it in another direction. And we send three or four of the Barley class missile frigates, not right underneath it, but within hitting zone of that missile coming in, right? So they each have maybe 40 basically anti-missile missiles, right? And so, and they don't stay all together. They're like 20, 30 miles, out of wherever the atomic bomb goes off. One may be taken out, but the others will survive. But the others still can shoot up at that thing coming in. So it's coming in. It's MIRV, multiple reentry vehicles, right? Normally they have a bunch of things that are dummies, and they'll have one of the real deal, right? And so they throw out a bunch of chaff, which disturbs the radar, so you can't tell what's what. But we got pretty good computers to measure the teeny and weeniest of anything. And so this one's a little heavier, so it's going a little slower. Maybe that's it. So those missile frigates start shooting up anti-missile missiles at that, right? Odds of them getting it, 60% gonna get it, 40% is gonna get through. So 40% with a nuclear weapon is still pretty intense. So bingo, let's say 60%, they blow it up, no big deal, right? I mean, it's still messy, but not a big deal. Thing blows up at 2,500 feet. It shoots out an EMP that fries pretty much all of Asia. Anything that's not protected in Japan or China or anywhere, from the Philippines to, you know, the South Pole will get, and so nobody's cars will work, jet planes won't start, people's for liberators in their chest will, so, you know, probably that EMP will kill maybe a million people, give or take, right? They don't have to get fried, but just that EMP, right? It will totally destroy the economics of that neck of the woods for at least a year, if not longer, right? And it depends on what kind of weapon they use and how much goes up into the air. So if it lofts a lot of water and even dirt from the sea bottom up into the upper atmosphere, highly radioactive, goes all over the place, and you'll get, clumps of super highly radioactive stuff all over the place. So towns, cities, farms will get, you know, contaminated. And that's just with one nuclear weapon. Now, if it hits, let's say, the aircraft carrier, that's 5,000 guys. That's $20 billion worth of assets. I mean, that one aircraft carrier group could give, single payer health care to everyone in America for 10 years. Right? Well, if Russia blows up that thing, we'll have to build three to make up for it, right? So, and we're not building, that class as a aircraft carrier. We're now building the Ford class, which costs 20 times more. So there you go. Um, that is my estimate of what will happen. Not to say it's going to happen, but I would give it a 40% chance of that specific thing happening and 60% chance of something like it, but not quite exactly that. Right. So, and you have to realize that this isn't being done because of any geopolitical thing that's being advertised. Because if Vlad really wanted, he was basically in the mix since the fall of the Iron Curtain. He was a colonel in Berlin, right? And he could have done a lot. You know, he went back and what did he went back to his hometown of one of those big cities. I forgot which one it is, but he became a cabbie, right? And then he worked for the mayor and he became a fixer, right? And then got into higher level um, things. So went to Moscow and became a bag man, right? So one of Putin's biggest problems is he's probably one of the richest guys on the planet, at least that we know, because all of Russia was a bad state in the '90s, and basically Western, you know, ego capitalists bought up all of Russia. That's where Gazprom, the Russian gas, gas pump that just got blown up. All of that was built by Western technology, not Russian. All of that was financed with Western money, right? And Vlad was able to become president because he got rid of Gorbachev, and Gorbachev wanted to keep. He was trying to keep the Soviet Union, but what's his name? The drunk hated Gorbachev, and the only way he could get rid of him was to destroy the Soviet Union and just keep Russia for himself, which he did. And then he had a real palsy wowsy with Bill Clinton, and then they fell out, and that's where Putin took over, and he took in a lot of money, and he bought up all. You hear about all those oligarchs? They're not running him; he's running them. Right? Question is, who's running over him? Now there are a bunch of guys who are pretty nasty in that mix in in Moscow. And if they get rid of, and what's really interesting is Putin is a middle of the road liberal compared to these hard ass guys that you have no idea about, right? And so, you know, um, that's what we're looking at. And now the only thing that can deal with it, so everyone could be pretty scared right now because we are closer to nuclear annihilation than we were in the Cuban Missile Crisis. There's way more missiles and there's way more. I mean, we only had a couple hundred back then. Now we have Close each United States and Russia each have about 6,000. Then you mix in everybody else. So that's 12,000 plus everybody else. So we have about 15 to 20,000 nuclear weapons ready to go. And all it would take to have a nuclear whimper, winter is to have a launch of about 60. If India and Pakistan went after each other, right? And they have somewhere between 30 and 50 each. I like that deliverable nuclear weapons. If they were to unleash that, we would have a nuclear winter that would starve the planet to death over 5 years. And so, if you unleash 20,000, and they don't quite have the megatonnage that we do, I mean, it's not a pretty picture, right? But my experience and exposure to all of this, we should have done this many, 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 many times over, but we didn't. So that means there is a higher power, right? And I wouldn't call it God. I wouldn't put any religious stamp on it because all religion is a business plan. But that thing that you feel in your heart, that's called love. Right? The thing that you feel in your head, which is called unconditional forgiveness. I mean, that's where humans go first. Then fear plugs in ego, and then you're off to the races of being a really nasty person. So, that's why I constantly say, in every day and every way, take the piece of yours and do your best to be in love's co-creation. I've been saying this now for the last 4 years, right? So that little passion play that I just laid out for you, I said 3 years ago, 2019, I was saying, hey, the big splat's coming, better watch out. And what we're seeing in global warming slash, earth changes, weather change, whatever you want to call it, is not really motivated. I mean, the shit that we put in the environment is not good. Like, the blowing up of that natural gas pipeline, and it's pumping methane into the atmosphere to the levels of every day that pipe. You'd think Russia would have turned the knob off by now, but no, it's still pumping out the same ungodly amount. And every day that pipeline's fracture is pumping out um, what the EU puts up into the upper atmosphere. Um, and not just, when I say EU, not just the stuff they're burning in Europe, but the getting of the oil from the Middle East and all of the processes that go from that to putting it in your car or turning on the heater in your house. So that's kind of where it's at. The- this war is causing an environmental catastrophe beyond belief, right? And when I lived in Brazil in 1988 and 89, we had only decimated 20% of the rainforests of Brazil. Today, we only have left about 18%, right? And under what's that, balsamic vinegar, whatever that guy's name is, he closed, the other guy who they called the commie, he at least was like keeping the forest on the down low. And Mr. Balsamic Vinegar, he basically took out what had been taken out 10 years before him. So, um, so it means we're either the stupidest creature on the face of this friggin' earth, meaning we're causing the demise of ourselves quite rapidly, meaning if everything we're doing is going to cause us to hit that tipping point within 4 years. I mean, we have gone past that. The tipping point was 20 years ago when we could have done something about it, but we didn't. The tipping point was back in 1972 when I was at the UN trying to start an NGO. Well, I did start an NGO about alternative technologies, but trying to get people. All they did was have nice, fancy little conferences and meetings around the world that talk about that stuff, and not in a big way, just a bunch small. We're the only ones who know this, and then go out to a fancy dinner, and then fly back on the private plane, right? I mean, I showed you pictures of the last thing I did there was to have a gigantic conference, right? Putting out this idea of having an alternative aesthetic away from, the conflict motif of where we were at the time, right? And and that was the first time anyone had used the World Wide Web as a worldwide. We had this conference that was world everywhere, and all over the world, Russia and China and you name it. It was there. It was end of the '80s, early '90s, and it was great. It was fun. Um, we knew more. Everything that people are talking about now. This was in 1980. I guess it was '87. We did this, and um, we talked about everything and the alternatives. How to go to solar power, how to replace incandescent lamps with not, compact fluorescents. I was talking about compact fluorescents, and when was I at Newark College of Engineering? I was at Newark College of Engineering when Newark had the big riots, and I was living in the West Village, and they had this train called the PATH train. It's like subway, and it went right from Sixth Avenue and Bank Street, right where I lived, where Herbert Berghoff and Uta Hagen had their school. I lived in their school. I was their TD, technical director, at 19, well, I was 20. Was I 19 to 20, somewhere in there? But I had been working for Herbert and Uta since I was 17. Anyway, so I would take and if I took the subway to Penn Station, then took a Jersey Central train to Newark, and then a bus or a subway, which wasn't a subway. Newark was just jacked up, and everything that people thought was a subway in Newark was just streetcars, right? Because they lifted the whole city up by 40 feet. And New York did the same thing. Our subways aren't tunnels. They were just tracks where those trains were when they were back in the day, steam engines. Then, when we got electricity, we jacked all of the city up because New York was a swamp. I mean, history is quite interesting, especially through the eyes of technology. So anyway, I would get on the PATH train, and so if I took a subway to Penn Central to Newark to a bus or a trolley, that would cost me $2. I just walked out my door, walked about 150 feet, went down the steps. It cost a dime. I put a dime in the turnstile, went places, and then it would go not only to Newark, it would go to before it went into the Penn Station in Newark. It let me off at this place that was only 10 blocks from my school, from Newark College of Engineering, from where was Newark College of Engineering, Newark High School, and the liberal arts. What's it called? Starts with an S. It's popping into my mind. Anyway, it was like where all the schools were, right? That's why they call it College Avenue. So anyway, I would walk to 10 blocks. If it wasn't raining, it was nice. And what was interesting, um, there was always a couple of cabbies waiting, between 8 a.m. and 10. There'd be at least three or four always waiting there. Because guys would take from New York and go in town because, now there was a tunnel from that station over to where they, whatchamacallits were, the underground trolleys, or subways. You could take those, and they were a dime too. So I, sometimes I took the trolley, sometimes I walked, right? I'd walk. Raining or cold, and sometimes I take a cab because it was only $1, right? And I was making those people were paying. They had. I was working with a guy named Lester Polikoff. If you look him up, he was the best boy for Joe Melziner. Joe Melziner, go look up Joe Melziner. He invented modern theater set design and lighting, right? He brought electricity to New York theater. Right? 'Cause before then, everyone they were using gas lights or arc lamps. So and both are a little dangerous. The you know the guys went to look for directors and run a new theater department at New College of Engineering, and they didn't need to have a theater school, New Engineering, because it was an engineering school. You know, it was only because it was a state school and somebody behind the was getting money from here to there, and somebody got paid off, and it was a greased, what do they call it, pork barrel, right? So they built this beautiful place. George and George built it. So I knew about it because I worked for George and George too. And George and George are the best theater builders. I think they're still doing it. But they, when Cats came on, they ripped out the whole thing and they all the staging could go up and down and turn around and flow. And Lincoln Center, the opera, they redid the whole backstage. So it was all computerized and they'd have all these how do you get this amazing set that looks like the top of a mountain and then the lights dim and then all of a sudden you're in a castle and then the lights dim and then you're on because all those sets were already there and they were just on like a lazy Susan. So anyway, I they offer Lester's in his 90s and he's like still set designing for Lincoln Center and Boston Opera and things like that. And I was his best boy. He goes, listen, I'm going to tell him to hire you. You want this? That'll be good for you. You're 22. You'll be ahead of the whole theater department. It'll start your career. It'll be great. I mean, my career was already going, the way I liked it, the Al career, right? So anyway, I said, sure. So I show up there and I get the job, Everyone's wearing suits and stuff. Me, I'm looking like me. And my supervisor over me was a guy who looked at me, knew Lester, and he knew my pedigree. And he said, okay, I think you'll do. And basically, he then proceeded, he walked me over to see it. It was amazing. It had a grid. It was beautiful. It was real. It was like as good as a small Broadway theater. Had a set, a shop, a costume shop. I mean, it's to teach kids. There had classrooms all around the sides. It sat 500 people. I think even more, maybe 1,000. I mean, it was a big theater, had a big proscenium. Anyway, so and it had a computer, had state of the art everything, sound, lights, So, I get there, I put together a curriculum, I give it to him, he gives it to the person who puts it in the thing that all the students look at and pick out a course, right? And I get budgeted for 5 teachers, right? And because I have this shop, I get a truck. And because I have to go to other universities, I get a car. My boss above me goes, you know how to drive, don't you? I go, yeah, sure. So he should have said, do you have a valid driver's license? Which I didn't, but I knew how to drive. So, I get the job. I give out the curriculum. I, decide not to hire anybody until I see if any students show up, right? I'm going to have, the first day, everyone shows up in the theater, right? And I will be on the stage and I will sit there and I will talk to them, right? So then I'll figure out how many teachers. And I have a bunch of friends I've already talked to in theater biz who really have good credentials to be, or to be teachers, and they love it. They get, just take the subway there and make $500 a week for doing 6 hours worth of work. They'd be fine with that. So I had it all set up, and I get online to get my thing right, and so it's this big long line of teachers, and they got this new machine from Polaroid that it's hooked up to their computer, their new computer that they have holding all their information. And so I get up there, and everyone in front of me is doctor this, doctor that, doctor right. And I have really long hair. I'm wearing mirrored sunglasses, and I got a black leather jacket, and I got a Velvet Underground T-shirt on, right? And so I, basically, sit on the chair. And he goes, "So what's your name?" I say, "I'm Bob." And so he goes, "Okay." And so, what's the D for? I said, "Not D. D is for double." Right? So anyway, he puts into the machine double Doctor Al Bob, executive director of this entity that I had, and chancellor of Newark College of Engineering's theater department. Right? Right? He hands me this thing. There's my picture. Mirrored sunglasses, long hair, black leather jacket, Velvet Underground T-shirt, and the state logo right over me. Newark, state said I was, working for the state of New Jersey. So I'm a state, employee, right? So curriculum goes out. Um, I the kid who did it is I go to where all the computer stuff is, and he's there, and he's the guy doing it, right? And I said, and he goes, "Not really." I said, "Oh, okay." I said, "So, I want you to print out my curriculum for me, and here, before you do that, I want you to write this under each part of the curriculum and describing the teacher, and then I print it out, put it in your memory there, and give me a printout." Right? So he does it, and so I go to the lady who is in charge of um, of the checkbook. Right? So I go, "Okay. So, hi, here's my ID. Oh yeah, double doctor, because everybody else is a doctor, but I'm a double doctor." And so she taps it in. She goes, "Oh, that's everything looks in order." And I said, "Well, my class size, I think, is going to kind of small, so I'm going to teach all the courses." And she goes, "Well, you've been budgeted this, so that means I'm just going to pay you $2,500 a week." I said, "Sounds good to me." She goes, "Have you joined the state, credit union?" I said, "What's that?" She said, "Well, it's a state-run bank." I said, "Oh." And she goes, "And if you join up, you'll get a credit card, and because you're going to have this much money in your thing every week, we'll give you $30,000. This is in 1972 when the crash had occurred. We'll give you $30,000 of credit." Oh, that's nice. And because you're going to be making so much, you just use it to buy your stuff. You will, we'll pay it right away. So you won't have to pay any interest. And we had this new thing called a debit card. You can, get that, and that just takes the money straight out of your checking account. I said, "Oh, it works just like a credit card, right? You can use either or." I mean, that has a logistics, it can't take everything that you have in your and you can have a checking account and a savings account, and you can also, we have these bonds that are now, because of everything was like inflation was through the roof, and so they were paying 16% on their bonds, on their state bonds. So I put half of my money every friggin' week into that 16%, right? And I um, put half the other, what was the other half of that quarter I put in my checking, the other quarter I put in my savings. And they were paying me 3% on my savings, right? And everything was automatic. And I just had these, I didn't even have a checkbook. I had a credit card and a debit card, right? And they gave me a truck and a car. And I drove that truck around New York City, and I used it for my business, my electric business. And I double park, I quadruple park, because the state of New York and the state of New Jersey had a nice little quid pro quo that in New York they wouldn't tow a state vehicle. Period. Right? I wasn't that bad, but I would park in places where you know the other side parking, and there's nobody parking there, and I would park in a place where It wasn't inconvenient for the you know fire truck or the road sweeper or whatever. And I had a state license plate and that's logo, state logo on the side of the truck and the car, right? And and they gave me 30 grand every semester to budget just to build sets, not my other budget for the running of everything. I let the what you want to call it, the guy who was head of housekeeping or what janitorial, whatever you call it. He ran the physical plant, right? So he took care of everything, and I let him take like extra 15 grand that he could spend any which way he wanted because it was coming through my department. And so that guy, anything I wanted, he did. So the first, I get all of that, get the job in July. I get everything sussed out. School starts, in end of August. And I've been there 2 months. What's the name of that other college? Oh, starts with an S. It'll pop into my mind. Anyway, so I kind of, you know, I kind of build because the roof was flat, right? And I build a replica of the Playboy Mansion's grotto in California, right? All water, a big, gigantic, because it was steel and concrete up there and had plenty of drainage for, when it rained. And so I built, a nice little jacuzzi that was just like a little lake and river and ponds and, you could, was very comfy, dark and lots of plants up there. And I built a little cabin to live in, right? Very nice. It looked out onto the grotto and had a big covered patio, slate patio, and had a really gigantic bedroom, mirrored, and the bathroom, a beautiful bathroom, and then had gigantic party room, opened kitchen, dining room, living room out onto the patio, all open, right? And I would have some kick-ass parties because my friends from New York would just have to get on the PATH train and take it straight to there, you know. So by the fall, I was having a good time. Oh, I can't believe I can't remember the name of that college. Big liberal arts college. Um, so I got to be friendly with the lacrosse coach. Anyway, so it was all good, right? And so it's really killing me. I can't remember. It'll pop into my head. As soon as I stop talking to you guys, it'll pop into my head. So anyway, I'll write it down and tell you the next show. So anyway, one day, and I had a place. I was living on Broome Street in Herbert Berghoff and Uda. They had a beautiful building right on the corner of 10th and Broome, and right on Bank, really, and not Broome, Bank, and Broome was in. I can't believe I just forgot that. Anyway, Tribeca and the first place. Anyway, so people could just take a subway there, and it was fun and interesting, and only cost a dime. And so they would come. We'd have kick-ass parties right there. And Herbert Berghoff and Uda Hagen, that big building, beautiful big building. And I lived where, I guess it was hospital, I think, but they had off of Water Street. They had on the West Side Highway, it was right there off of Water Street. They had a big, almost park. It was a parking lot with a loading platform, right? And it was gigantic loading platform. I mean, not just something 8 feet by 50 feet. It was like 40 feet by 100 feet and had a big roof over it. So man, we could have big parties. I built a big bricked, I could cook anything on it, and it's there was a used restaurant supply place that Mike Finelli owned over there, and so I could go in there and just get anything I wanted. So anyway, I had this great place, Uda Hagen and Herbert Berghoff's school on Bank, and this other place on top of the Newark College of Engineering. And so everybody in that school were engineers, black pants, white shirt, black tie, you know, slide rule tied to their leg. And so I didn't, have anything to do with those guys. Well, a little bit. They had a nice cafeteria. I could eat all I wanted there. And my boss, who was, I called him the brain trust. It was the guy, whoever was chancellor, was always moving through. It was like a political gift, and that person never stayed there. People who ran the school, heads of the departments, not the guys who ran individual, not the guy who ran the math department or this department or that, but those were under 5 of these entities. I call them the brain trust. And my boss was one of those guys, right? And so he saw that his budget was going to raise just by me being there, right? So he got a percentage of that, right? So one thing he said, just don't get noticed and spend every penny that is allotted to you. I said, okay, not a problem. We'll do, right? So I'm, having a great time. Not Stanford. Starts with an S. Anyway, so I'm. How long am I talking? An hour and 21 minutes. Have to go soon. The rainstorm's going to hit here soon. I got things to do outdoors, and it's starting to rain. Anyway, I just finished this story up, and it'll continue. And this is how to be at ease, right? So, I'm running my electric business with that truck, right? I got this car, and my boss says to me one time in around September, doing a great job. Remember what I say. Don't be noticed. Spend every nickel. I said, okay, not a problem. So I basically decide I haven't really had a good vacation, and the last time I saw America was when I was with Lester and the Gray Rabbit, and before that, when I was a teenager, hitchhiking and riding the rails. Right. So now I have a car. I got more money than God. I can have a really good time. Right. So I get into this nice. It was a LeBaron, right? White with red and black leather interior, Corinthian leather, and this sucker could move, right? And had a big block engine. So had a nice stereo, 8-track, and I had a little plug. You could plug anything into it, electric guitar, anything you wanted. I don't know why they had it, but you could. A microphone, anyway, and it had great speakers in the door. You open up all the doors and turn on the stereo. It like you could have sound for a whole football stadium. So I take off and I go to DC, see some friends in DC. Go to, down to Philly, see some friends. Go up to College Park, where the University of Pennsylvania, see some friends there. Go to John Hopkins, see some friends there. I just go hit all of my college friends. Go to DC. I went to DC, and then anyway, I just keep bopping around like that. And the fall is coming in. I go down to Florida, and I have friends down there, and so I have friends in Fort Lauderdale and Miami and South Beach, and I had a buddy who bought a whole bunch of these funky buildings in South Beach, and I spent a good deal of Christmas and November from Thanksgiving till maybe St. Patrick's Day, right? And I came up to I had friends who were just starting to make the art school in not St. Peter's, but the other St. place that has the big St. Patty's Day party. and they were just like having it in their backyard before it became the whole town. And then I decided to drive up to Nashville, where I have a friend, and stay with them for a bit, then hit 40 and just go across the West, right? And I got to Denver, and I kind of went down, I think, on 25 down um, to New Mexico, and stopped at the town of, of Walls, and then went over to Las Vegas, and then LA, and down to San Francisco, and kind of went and visited some of my buddies who were still at Xerox Park. And then I drove back, right? And I got stopped by cops 3 times because twice out in the desert where I was doing like 120 cruise control and just do 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 do, and I didn't even see the cop until I looked in the rearview mirror, and like way back there was the red flashing light. So I slowed down, pulled over to the side, got out, was smoking a cigarette, and police guy shows up. And, how fast you were going? Oh no, officer, how fast are you doing? 120. How could that car do that? So he got that big block. Oh, and then he looked, and then he was like all about the motor, and he was right. And he goes, "You ain't got any ID?" And I gave him my, Newark College of Engineering ID. Oh, double doctor. Oh, that's pretty good. The logo is on right on my face of the state, and on the door of the car, the logo. He goes, "Now, doctor, yes, you're out in the middle of, there's nobody here. Yeah, I'm not going to give you a ticket, but just slow down. Just do 90." And I said, "Okay." I was just cruising along because, yeah, I know how that is. I do the same thing every now and then. So I got stopped once in Nevada and once in Arizona, and once in San Francisco by some Nazis cops, and they were nice too. You know, I just went, I wasn't like, I was, oh, what did I do wrong, officer? And they said, well, it's you didn't do anything wrong, really. It's just that you got that long hair and a beard and mirrored sunglasses and the cowboy hat, and you're riding a vehicle, you know, with a New Jersey state logo on, and you're in San Francisco, and yeah, what? And I said, no problem. I pulled out my ID, handed it to him. He said, oh, double doctor. Okay, no problem, doctor. Well, have a nice day. So I got never showed him my driver's license or the registration of the vehicle or the insurance card, just my double doctor ID card. Right. So I get back to school, and it closes. When did they close? I think they closed April, May. I think in May. Anyway, I get there and I cruise in, and I, don't make a big splash. I just kind of, park in my parking spot. Um, and I first went to New York and got the truck and brought that back. So one day the truck showed up, and then, a couple days later the car showed up, and then a couple days later, I started hanging out at the library and hanging out at the um, cafeteria, and then, before school ended, I went to um, and I had used my I had a PO box in New York City, and that was my all my stuff was sent to them. So anyway, I went to my boss, and he goes, "Oh, you're finally back." So yeah, well, I've been no, no. He goes, "Really?" He goes, "No one cared, and you were really, really great at being invisible." And he goes, "Here." And I look at this thing, and it's a framed thing, and I have been chosen to be the best professor of that year, the best new professor of the whole um, New Jersey State College organization, right? I get this Brendan Burns Award of Service, right? Because you're doing great. You're like, you can be here for the rest of your friggin' life. Just you spend every nickel, and you're giving you extra 20%. You know, and so I'm like, he goes, "Can I use that grotto up there?" And I said, "Sure, sure. Here's the key." Right. So anyway, so I'm now so the summer starts, right? And there's nobody there. The research guys are there. So I start hanging out with some of the research guys who are interesting, who aren't the scholastics. They're more the scholars, and they're doing pretty interesting stuff, right? And I my electrical engineering background, my Tesla background, so I put a crew I could hang out. So now I could hang out in the scholastic scene and not be so ooh. So they were getting used to me, right? And so I trimmed myself up a little bit, because I never have to look like anything. I just basically let my hair grow long because I was, you know, didn't have a place to have it cut. Yeah, I used to have a place right across the street from me, and I had this barber, you know, he had Parkinson's, right? And I would let him shave. You can't move. You can't move at all. Keep your eyes closed. He put the hot towel over my eyes, and he would like a baby's mom. Right? And if I ever wanted to freak people out, I would take him and let them watch Patty give me a shake. But anyway, so one day in in the Maytime kids, no, it was summertime. Some April, May, June. I was staying with Phil and Jane on Broome Street at Una Bear Gallery, and Una was born, and her sister North was born, and I was Una's godfather. And so anyway, so I basically um, go get shaved, right? Shaved, and I get a like crew cut, right? And so when I go back and see my boss, he goes, "Wow, you cut everything off." I said, "Yeah, big deal. I just let it grow again." He goes, "That's pretty amazing. You can just do that." I said, "Sure, it's no big deal." It grows back. And right now, it doesn't grow back too much, but it still kind of grows back. Anyway, so I kind of looked different, right? I looked more, acceptable by everybody, right? Even because I was hanging out in the Portuguese and the black section of Newark. And again, once people got to know me, I was okay. But the long hair, mirrored sunglasses, beard look, so, but I was all trimmed out. It was nice, right? So I decide that I want to find a place. I want to check Newark out. If I'm going to be here forever, might as well check this out. So I do because when I was down in Florida helping my friend remodel the buildings in South Beach, he bought these buildings for nothing 10, 15, 20 grand a piece. And they were like, had 5, 6 apartments. And I mean, one was like the Birdcage, had a big theater nightclub down below. Another had a restaurant. Another had like a big general store. Another had like, could be anything. And he had another one that was kind of like an office building. He like bought everything, like 6 buildings for 100 grand. It was one guy wanted to just get one. Most people just wanted to buy one building. He wanted to sell everything, right? And the bottom line was 100 grand. So my friend bought everything for 100 grand, and then we started putting them up. And so I realized, buy low, right? So Newark was bottom of the barrel. So I was looking around for a place, and I was walking around one day, and right on this, it's like a line. This side is all Portuguese, this side's all black. Black food's amazing, Portuguese food's amazing, and they kind of get along. They like go along to get along. They don't really go out of their way. So anyway, I'm you know looking, hanging out at different restaurants and doing stuff, and I'm in this black restaurant. This lady looks at me and goes, "Son, what do you do?" And I said, "Pretty much everything." She goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, I am at the Newark College of Engineering." "Oh, you're a janitor?" I said, "No, I run a department." "What? You're head of it?" And I showed her my double doctor. "Oh my God, Max, look at this, a double doctor." And she goes, "Do you know anything about Hammond B2 organs?" I said, "I know everything because I used to fix them when I was at the Phil Maurice. That was one of my things because we had a big Hammond with a Leslie." So she takes me up the road to this old Masonic lodge, and they got 6 Hammond B210s. Just and like another four in the back room. And she goes, "Yeah, we got these off this guy," and three of them kind of work, but none of them really work. But there must be enough spare parts for you to get at least six of them to work because there's six of us who know how to play these, and we really want to rock this place. And this was their temple. They were, they had a church, right? And it was that church that you saw in the Blues Brothers, where you know the guy who's the hardest working man in rock and roll, and he does the triple somersaults into the church. That guy. That was the kind of church this was. It was a rocking church. And so I said, no problem. So, I methodically rolled them all together into this back room, which was like a shop, a big, it had nice tables, had good lighting. I brought in some of my tools. It wasn't far from the PATH train. And so, I basically go to work on these having B2s with the Leslies. And I build a nice stage for them. And theater guy, I light them. I just get new curtains for. I mean, I make this place the bomb. Yeah, I built nightclubs, discos. This is a disco nightclub church, right, with a restaurant off to the side. I mean, it was the bomb. And so I became these girls. I mean, and they were all in their 50s and 60s. I was their grandson. And they were black women as grandmas as you could get, like my mama, and that was me. I was brought up by a black woman who was a super duper nurse, and I was the character in the movie Jerk, the character that Steve Martin. That was me, but I could dance. I did. I was like I am. I am not like I am an African American that is melanin challenged. Right. So anyway. So these girls love me, and they were hooking me up with all their nieces, all their granddaughters, all their everything. And it was amazing because I had about 15 girlfriends out of this church, and they weren't looking for a husband. They were just so enamored by me, and I would take them out. And sometimes I'd take 4 or 5 of them out because when I was 16, I used to hang out with one of the first Marlboro men, Carlton Haynes. And he always had 3 girls on each of his arms. He was a jerk, but he was my best friend when I was 16. He's 38 years old, and and why he's such an asshole? Why do you hang out with that guy? I said, well, man, look, he's got a lot of money, he's got a lot of pull, and he's always got 3 girls on each arm, and he's got another 5 on. I'm his wingman. I always get the pick of the ones in the behind. They're usually the more interesting ones, right? So these girls were the grandma's girls, and yes, so that's the thing about sex. It is a biological thing. We have hormones that want us to do it, but we don't have to be like dogs humping everyone's leg, right? There's other things within relationships, and that's what I had with all these women. Now, every now and then, we would get a little frisky and we would spark, right? Court and spark, like Joni Mitchell says, right? And that was great. So all summer long, I fixed that place up into the wild and amazing temple, Grandma's temple, right? And right off to the side, the lady she opened up another restaurant, right? And that was the church, right? And her restaurant was called The Church. So um, those Masons, they got rooms every which way. And so the girls, grandma said, well, you need a place to live. So why don't you live right here? And they took me up to this beautiful secret, like where they did the secret ceremonies and marble and great drainage and big stained glass windows. And they brought up this one lady had a moving business. So she had a warehouse full of furniture. So she brought up a bunch of nice furniture, big bed, big, everything, big tables and things for books, and they had the Masons had a library, and the books were still there. All those little esoteric books were still friggin' there. So, you know, so that was the summer of 72, I guess, 72 or 3, 72, maybe 71, because I left in 72. That's right. So, So, um, almost had the name of that college. So, but now I'm not hanging out in the grotto as much. I'm hanging, you know, out with the grandmas, right, all summer, and with their nieces and granddaughters and everybody else. I mean, I had like 20 girlfriends, right? And so, and I was starting to look like Superfly. And so I think Shaft came out then. I wasn't that tall. And I was starting to let my hair grow. I tried to have an afro, that just did not work. I went to being bald then. They gave me a perm, did not work. I back to, yeah. So um, I'm having the greatest of times, and so fall comes, and I go back to the lady and say, "Same, everything's the same, nothing changes, just keep going." And she goes, "Okay." She hits the button, bingo bango. Right? Um, and again, I wait that day on the stage. Wait, nobody shows up. Right now, I built the grotto upstairs. I need another little project for that $30,000 worth of. I did not have. I want if I was going to spend money, the state money, I was going to do it, you know, on the state's property. I was going to go build something someplace else, and I mean that's like a severe no-no. So I knew better than that. So there was the back of the the thing, and there was a hill to the back of it, and it went down to that college, right? Mm, it'll come to me. So there was a fire door and a metal stairs out of that, but it was just a fire door from my where this hallway was. On one side of the hallway was the shop that led, had a big stage door onto the stage and had a stage door to a loading dock to bring stuff on. And that loading dock went over to where the emergency door was, right? So, and then it went off to this parking lot that was over there and steps that went down to the hill that went down to that college, right? To because you've got 500 people in a theater, you got to get have a place for them to run out of. So anyway, so I built a gigantic deck all the way around, and I made not a deck, like a house. And I saw a um, a um, a blueprint. Um, George and Joyce, who built theaters and stage and sets and all that kind of stuff. They had a real collection of blueprints of all kinds of stuff, right? And so they had a blueprint of Father Knows Best house. So I physically built a real, I mean, that was a set. I built the real deal based on the Father's Knows Best house and made it even bigger. Like, so it was whole L, right? It had a whole big deck from the house. And I made all of this is where I really got into, um, you know, um, junk because in Newark they had some really severe junkyards. And when I was building the grandma's disco whoopie place along the harbor, the Hudson, where Newark is, they have all these big where they fix boats like like you know tugboats with big motors and big. I mean, those are big, and can pull a gigantic ship. So, they're pretty big. So they're junkyards. I mean, batteries like the size of cars. And so I would just rummage through all of their stuff. And they had these really amazing, like garage doors, but for ships that were like indestructible, meaning a hurricane could hit them, no water would come through. And they had these ones that were made out of, I don't know, Lexan or some like super duper plastic, but you could see through them and they were indestructible, right? And they were electric and they were never used. They came in. He had one that he was using, and he had like six of them in crates ready to go. And I said, "So, can you deliver this to the Newark College of Engineering?" And so I used my little Newark College Engineering credit card for project, the theater credit card, not mine, not my debit card, but the theater, right? I had, $30,000 worth of stuff on that to go buy stuff. And each one of those amazing garage doors had everything, the rails, everything, the motors. Each one was 300 bucks. I bought six of them. So the wall that was facing the big deck and where the sun was, sunset, sunrise, sunset came through that whole wall. I made these garage doors. So that whole wall of that house, I could just push a button and one would come. I could put them all six up or one of them. So it was truly an amazing structure. That the school down there, I'm going to find out the name of that school. But anyway, so that's Stanford. That's in California. It starts with an S. So now, not only could they see the grotto on top of the theater, but they could see, Father's Knows Best house, right? And I had little stuffed, Bud and a kitten and Bob and all the rest. So anyway, by the time school started, I had that built, and it was so nice to sit on that deck because it was covered deck, so I could be in the sun. And this is where I got to really love wheelchairs because the grandmas, this lady who had the storage moving business, she had about 10 wheelchairs, and so she got me all this really nice big furniture up there, big bed, big armoire, big you know you name it, I had it. I had these great tables anyway. But she had, like, oh, you got a wheelchair, I'll take two. And they were great because you could just roll around the place and get up, and they're really sturdy and they really support your back. And anyway, at the school, I got another five. And so they were great to roll around. And I would just roll around because um, the Fathers Know Best house and the, load in a platform, the shop where we built everything, and the stage were all on the same level. I could just roll around anywhere. And there was a inclined plane that went, um, on the side where the shop was. If we were going to build anything into the audience, which we did often, we could roll things down there. And if there was a band or any of that kind of stuff, we could just roll it down there. So I could roll down there and then be rolling around and I could roll out to the parking lot. Then I could roll out through the whole campus of Newark College of Engineering, NCE. Anyway, so and I'd roll around, just had a good old time. And she had a couple of electric ones, and so I really turned them into hot rods. I mean, get those suckers up to 30 miles an hour with a nice induction motor. So life was good, you know. And so, I was making 2,500 bucks a week, not doing anything. Had my electric business, making art. Had this wild, crazy place in Newark in a Masonic lodge. Father's Knows Best house and the Playboy Grotto upstairs. And I was living in Herbert Berghoff and Uta Hagen's building. So, that's why I was known as the dude. And, you know, I had other places that I had lived I could still live in too. So um it was good. Life was good for Al. But all those times I still had sorrows and endeavors. And if you go back a few of these stories, maybe five back from this one, I will tell about my sweetheart, my high school sweetheart, T, who lived in Maine, and she was a Olympic skier, and she got smushed. She was the and tragedy of defeat. That was her. She smashed into a concrete abutment doing 110 on skis and flailing through the air. Right, so she was a little messed up, and then she had other problems, and then she died when I was, right around that time, 21, right then. So that was a great tragedy. I had another really good friend. I had a number of friends commit suicide, and people were getting sick of something they had no idea what, and it was AIDS, right? Because I built a lot of gay clubs, so I knew a lot of gay people. And gay people to me were just other people that had a better sense of humor. That tragedy was all around them, and they could just kind of plow through it. It was pretty amazing. And that's what this show was supposed to be about, how to just be happy, and how to deal with suffering. And there's wars going on everywhere. I had a whole bunch of stuff queued up on my phone, and I couldn't get it to play. So I told you these stories instead. And you seem to enjoy them more, right? So maybe I'll have to go back to more of that. So okay, so this is a series in the how to be happy series. I'm going to tell you a story, right? And it's going to be about everything, just like all my stories are, right? And don't believe a word I say. And good luck with that. So I got to get going. Love you guys.